Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm delighted that more than 330 people have registered for this event and have signed up. And we're launching today the much awaited Korn Ferry report on gender balance that we commissioned just last year as the Charter. So my name is Sumati Sharma. I'm proud to be the founder and co-chair of the Women in Aviation and Aerospace Charter. The Charter reflects the aspiration to see gender balance at all levels across aviation and aerospace. So we launched in 2018 at Farnborough Air Show with the government's full support, and we had 40 founding signatories. And we're delighted now, 2.5 years on, we have over 200 signatories. And organizations that sign up to the Charter are committed to be the very best at driving diversity and inclusion and providing fair opportunities for women to succeed, from apprenticeships all the way to the highest levels in the boardroom. So we know it's been an incredibly challenging year for our industry, with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic being so far-reaching across aviation and aerospace. But we also know and have known that our industry is hugely underrepresented, with stats like only 5% of the world's pilots being female and only 15% of the UK's technology and engineering graduates being female. We knew that undertaking this research was a critical and important milestone to help us achieve our ambitions as an industry to achieve gender balance. So the research is based on interviews and surveys of more than 1,500 people, and the results are truly eye-opening, as you will see. And they reveal what we could all be doing to make our sector more diverse and inclusive. So today, I am so excited to welcome some very special guests. Joining us today, we have our Minister for Aviation and Maritime, Robert Courts MP from the DfT. We have Baroness Sue Campbell, who's the Director of Women's Football at the Football Association, the FA. And we have Anne-Marie Taylor, who's Associate Client Partner and co-author of the survey from Korn Ferry. And my excellent co-chair, Jacqui Sutton, will be joining us at the end to lead the Q&A. So she'll ask your questions that you can post now on the platform to the appropriate panelist in the last 15 minutes of our hour together. So make sure you get your questions ready. The Q&A is open from now, so start posting them. Any we don't answer in the event, we'll endeavour to respond to you individually. Today, I'm also delighted to take the opportunity to welcome a new signatory who signed up to the Charter today. So the Jet Business is the world's first and only street-level corporate aviation showroom for the marketing and acquisition of corporate aircraft. And we're delighted that today they are signatory number 217, and I'm particularly delighted as they're an SME. Whilst we have very large businesses signed up as founders, whether it be Royce, EasyJet, Virgin Atlantic, but actually the SMEs and the support we get from those businesses for what we want to do in the Charter is really important. I also want to thank our partners and sponsors who helped make this event happen. We couldn't have been here today unless Aviation and Aerospace hadn't supported the cost and development of the report, and also Bays. And finally, and most importantly, I want to thank you. Thank you for making the time. It's people like you who've joined us today with a passion to see long-term change who can make a difference. You are the change makers. And today I ask you one thing. Please spread the messages that you hear today. And when you read the report, it's a 100-page, full of insights report. So share what you hear today on your social media, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever channels you have, but also your internal corporate channels. So also in terms of housekeeping today, at 11, we'll be observing our 2-minute silence together. So I'll make sure that we're on time with that. So now, without further ado, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Robert Courts, who will talk us through the importance of gender diversity for the industry. So to tell you a little bit about Robert, he was first elected as the Member of Parliament for Witney and West Oxfordshire in 2016. And in September 2020, I'm delighted that he was appointed the Parliamentary Undersecretary in the Department for Transport with responsibility for aviation, maritime, and security. So thank you, Robert, for joining us. It's great to have you, and I'll hand over to you.
Sumati, thank you very, very much indeed. It's an absolute pleasure to join you all this morning as we launch this latest report into gender balance in the aviation and aerospace industry. Now, as Sumati said, I've become the aviation minister relatively recently, but it's a portfolio I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted to hold, having had lots of involvement with aviation on a parliamentary basis already through the all-party parliamentary group for general aviation and on the all-party parliamentary group for the armed forces, where I was the chair for the Royal Air Force, and I represent Witney, which includes West Oxfordshire, and that includes RAF Brize Norton, which is of course the largest base in the Air Force. So I have a very strong Witney constituency interest in aviation as well. And I absolutely, am fully aware and need no persuading of the vital importance of aviation. It's utterly critical to the fabric of our economy. It's one I am going to be championing as much as I possibly can with every fibre of my being through particularly what is obviously at the moment one of the most challenging periods in its history. Of course, COVID-19 has had an unprecedented impact upon skills, core skills, retention, job losses, of course, because of the nature of the challenge that we have. And of course, at a time like this, it would be very easy for us all to think about survival, to be in survival mode only. And of course, while obviously we have challenges to work through, as the department is looking through the short-term measures to help people get through this immediate crisis, there's much more that we need to be considering as well. Just give you a flavour of some of the short-term things that we've been doing at the moment. So we've worked very closely with the Civil Aviation Authority to allow things like temporary exemptions for pilots to enable them to retain their flight currency through virtual training, flight sims and general aviation use. We've worked with DWP, the Department for Work and Pensions, to ensure that job centres can consider those in the aviation industry for the DWP's Flexible Support Fund. And we are continuing to work hard to support those and to guide the sector through this terrible crisis and through into recovery. But it is equally important, and it remains of paramount importance, that we don't lose sight of something that is absolutely vital to the aviation industry, as indeed it is to every industry, which is diversity and inclusivity, which must remain central to everything, and we continue to do over the months and years ahead. Now, we're here today because we want to see more women in aviation, and I'm particularly aware of this when I'm with my family, because I have a young daughter who's absolutely fascinated by aircraft, and I want her to have the same opportunities in aviation, if she so wishes, as my son does. So I see this on a personal basis every day, and I'm absolutely passionate about it. Sumati gave us this statistic earlier of, women are accounting for just over 5% of airline pilots, and I think just 1 in 70 airline captains is woman. Well, look, this just simply isn't good enough. And we have to do much better than that. But this issue of diversity is crucial for us all. But it's not just a women's issue. It's not just that we need to take action upon this because it's the right thing to do. It's also because businesses and teams are proven to be more successful when they have a diverse and inclusive workforce. And so there's two aspects to this. Both are equally important. Diversity isn't just the right thing to do, but it also brings profitability, creativity and diversity of thought, and we all must applaud that and do what we can to improve matters. So it's an authentic passion for all of us here, and we will drive change across the sector. We have a huge amount to be proud about in this sector and its history. And I'm absolutely passionate about learning from our country's past, the story of who we are and why we are where we are. And the aviation history sector is as much a part of this as everything else in this incredibly rich and diverse country with its inspiring past. And let's look, for example, at some of the pioneering female aviators of the past. classic example of this, particularly when we're speaking on the 11th, on Armistice Day, is the Air Transport Auxiliary, who flew aircraft from factories to airstrips and to be repaired to maintenance centres as well during World War II, playing an absolutely vital part. And there's no way the Air Force could have continued without the part that they played in that story, which is utterly vital. It kept frontline squadrons operating. I have a particularly good constituent interest in this, because one of these amazing women was called Mary Ellis, and she grew up near to Brize Norton, in Brize Norton Village, just outside the base, and she has a street named after her in Whitney, and she was fascinated by aircraft. She describes herself as having been so since she was knee-high to a duck. Her passion in aviation only increased when her father paid a flying circus to take her up in a de Havilland Moth when she was just 8. And she went on to deliver more than 400 fighter planes across the country during her time with the ATA. Now, of course, the experiences of these women were not without challenges, far from it. Those were immensely challenging times for women in aviation, but that passion enabled them to persevere and become role models for others across the industry, and they remain so decades later. And we're making real advantage of this now, because at the DFT, we're encouraging others to step forward as modern aviation ambassadors. People like Kirsty Murphy, who was the first woman to fly with the Red Arrows, and Patricia Mauli Porter, the first civilian female pilot in Ghana. We really hope that wonderful, inspiring women like those will inspire other young people into a range of jobs in the industry. Of course, it's not just being pilots, critically important though that is, but there's other careers as well. There's engineering, there's air traffic controllers, and many more beside. And whilst this report that we launched today showcases gender diversity, many other groups are not well represented in this sector either, and it shows us there's much more work to do there as well. That's those from a lower socioeconomic background, or those who carry multiple identities, BAME women, disabled women, and LGBT women. So that commitment to diversity in aviation can no longer be simply surface level. We've got to ensure that we have a diverse workforce with a pipeline of skilled workers, because that's what's key to our success, not only now, not only as we recover from coronavirus, but looking to the future. And that's the reason why the government has established its Reach for the Sky programme, because we have this aim to make aviation more diverse, more inclusive, and more accessible for all. And this report, which the Department for Transport has been involved in since its inception, shows us that diversity and inclusion must be embraced wholeheartedly at the most senior levels of an organisation if we want to bring real transformative change. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the department working together with industry on the next steps that we need to take to make this change, to see that impact of senior leaders committed to diversity, but most of all, to seeing more women inspired to drive this change themselves. It's an exciting future, lots to do, but I can't wait to be a part of it. And thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Robert, for that. And we really appreciate everything you and the Department for Transport have done for the Charter and our ambitions. So now I'm going to hand over to Anne-Marie. And Anne-Marie Taylor joined Korn Ferry in 2019. She is a specialist in diversity and inclusion, executive succession, and global talent management. And she's previously worked at the London Stock Exchange and at Rolls-Royce. So through Rolls-Royce, obviously has experience of the industries we're talking about. And Anne-Marie is the co-author of the report, and she'll now share with us what it tells us and these key insights. So Anne-Marie, over to you.
Thank you. So as the Minister said, businesses are more successful with diverse teams. In fact, organisations lacking diversity are potentially missing out on revenue, profit, engagement and loyalty. Diversity and gender balance isn't a nice to have, it's a business imperative to maximise success. I was really eager to be involved in this research to understand what can be done to increase gender balance in the aviation and aerospace sectors, having, as Sumati mentioned, previously been responsible for diversity and inclusion at Rolls-Royce. I know there's no shortage of effort, commitment and number of initiatives taking place, and I can personally say that I was lost for choice literally when choosing where to focus, who to partner with externally for support, and how to balance continuous learning from events and conferences with taking action and getting things done. So if gender balance has always been a long-standing focus of attention in the aviation and aerospace sectors, why is progress a slow journey? What are the challenges and what can be done? We launched our research at the beginning of the year and then COVID hit. A number of people approached us and expressed concern about rapid unravelling of the slow progress that's been made. Concerns included, if redundancies are going to be on the basis of last in, first out, does that mean more women will be affected, as in recent years, an increasing number have been attracted to the sectors? And will organisations stop investing in programmes to increase gender balance? Well, we hope not. So I'm just going to share a slide with you. Okay, roughly half of women in the aviation and aerospace sectors felt that they had been treated differently due to their gender. For males, this drops to roughly 1/5. So if 1 in 2 females feel that they've been treated differently, we know that affects engagement, ambition, and the desire to persuade others to join their organisation or follow a similar career route. And that's before you overlay other underrepresented groups, as the Minister mentioned. That's what's known as intersectionality. But the good news is we have identified a number of steps that can be taken, and some are very simple, very powerful, but no cost. Others do require investment and planning, and that can address perception, engagement, and accelerate progress towards gender balance. We're really confident this is possible because we explored other sectors that have made demonstrable progress, and we looked at football, not only a traditionally male-dominated environment, but a sport where women were actually banned from playing on Football Association member pitches from 1921 until 1971. And yet in the last few years in particular, the increasing levels of participation, fan base and performance for the women and girls game has been impressive. We investigated the steps that they've taken to understand what lessons can be learned, and I'm delighted that Baroness Campbell is going to share her story with you shortly. In addition to investigating the detail behind the approach taken in football by interviewing several members of the FA team, we surveyed over 1,500 people from the aviation and aerospace, but other sectors too more broadly. And we interviewed over 50 people from aviation and aerospace, including chairs, CEOs, through to people who had only been employed for a few years post-qualification. So if you participated, thank you so much. The overwhelming response gave us a really robust platform of data to base our recommendations on. So our recommendations. The first theme we identified was don't start with a women's strategy, create a purpose for all. It's overwhelmingly clear that people need to unite behind purpose. Purpose must be fueled by authentic passion, and that passion for inclusion. This does not rule out having dedicated strategies for specific challenges. It doesn't prevent you from investigating why women and other groups are underrepresented. However, we found these steps shouldn't be where you start or where you finish. Starting with an explicit purpose where all people feel they're supported to fulfill their potential, to fuel ambition, and back that up with commitment creates a culture of inclusion. Aiming for outcomes of better debate, robust decisions, sense of support, engagement, and ultimately fulfilling both individual and business performance ambitions is how outcomes should be evaluated and recognised. Think about and communicate the benefits that go beyond the numbers. Passion is deeply personal. It has to be authentic. We learned that outstanding leaders take time to understand what drives their passion. They start conversations to help others identify their passion. We heard that most people have felt they were not part of the majority group at one point or other in their lives. Perhaps they felt differently and potentially vulnerable, and that felt uncomfortable and unfair. And that feeling was a consistent source of purpose for those individuals when they themselves progressed into leadership positions to get involved in moves to support gender balance and inclusion generally. But share your passion too. Tell others what you want to achieve. We call this Excite with inclusive ambition. We found many committed leaders who do have authentic passion based on genuine personal experience, but are not openly sharing their story. However, we found that sharing stories about what drives your purpose engages others. It creates trust, it ignites ambition. So let me just show you something else. So we asked about the effectiveness of talent and succession practices enabling the progression of women. Roughly half of respondents agreed, but this dropped to only a quarter of female individual contributors. We wondered what more could be done to instill confidence in those female individual contributors and indeed first-line managers. And let me show you how much impact senior leaders can have when they're not openly and authentically committed to achieving gender balance. You can see here that nearly half of females and 2/3 of males felt the talent and succession practices in their organisations are effective in identifying and progressing women where leaders are openly committed. This drops to less than 1/5 of males and only 6% of females where senior leaders were not openly committed. And this was a really consistent pattern. All factors that we looked at contributing to increasing gender balance were positively or negatively impacted by the messages and role modelling of senior leaders. We also learned that it's essential you don't create a sense of exclusion. We were inundated by comments from people of all genders and backgrounds expressing frustration and annoyance about overt attention on one gender. We've already learned that half of women feel treated differently due to gender, so adding further spotlight on that is not appreciated. We've heard from men who felt they would automatically be excluded from opportunities purely due to their gender. The purpose must go beyond numbers and include benefits for all. What's changed as a result of having greater diversity and better balance? What was the impact on the quality of conversation, debate, and challenge? These aspects must be looked out for and noted. The positive impact of an authentic, openly passionate drive for inclusion and the negative impact of division demonstrated in the study is undeniable. The second theme we identified is about investment, not tokenism. Ambition to increase gender must be backed up by sustained and coordinated investment within the aviation and aerospace sectors. Action planning requires dedicated focus and a detailed understanding of the conditions in each organisation and the businesses within affecting attraction, recruitment and progression. We found that aspirations to address the issue are not currently being matched by investment in resources and funding. Lessons can be learned here from the world of women and girls football, where the FA has committed investment, and as a result, multidisciplinary teams have been given a clear mandate to bring about change and effectively are coordinating their efforts. So start with a game plan. Don't dive into action without a plan. There are so many options and initiatives in the aerospace and aviation sectors. It's easy to jump in and get started before carefully examining all the factors. Before you develop a strategy, are you truly clear about the levers of influence, deep-seated norms or structures that affect attitudes in your organisation? What is your ambition? What resource do you require? What budget will this take and what will the return be? I know that many owners of the D&I agenda have a strategy and a budget, but how well understood is this by key decision makers? Do they know what the modelled outcomes are with more investment or less investment? Infrastructure is essential. When it comes to resource, we found that it's often lacking. Many organisations don't have dedicated ownership, and for many larger organisations, dedicated ownership to gender balance and inclusion is in a small intact team purely focused on diversity and inclusion. At best, we found, in addition, models of champions across the organisation volunteering support in addition to their day job. But we saw from the FA that an infrastructure with a mandate to support the vision provides a powerful enabler. That team should be multidisciplinary and distributed across levels, functions and businesses, but with a dotted line of responsibility to a dedicated champion or owner of inclusion and gender balance who drives purpose, passion, objectives and support. That means allocating responsibility into both dedicated roles distributed throughout the organisation for gender balance or taking existing roles in manufacturing, communications, program management, for example, and adding an additional objective into those roles to increase gender balance. This has got to include freeing up a proportion of time to provide that dedicated focus. And in reality, it's a significant organisation design exercise, and it's important that objective setting, recognition and capacity are among the various elements considered. And it's also important that the distributed team regularly come together to refocus on purpose, share their experiences, their suggestions, support each other, and essentially come together and re-energise. And this all has to be measured. We've said monitor closely and move. We found that measurement's highly variable, and we recommend a consistent approach to measurement adopted across the sectors using the Charter as a vehicle. The greatest enabler would be investment in a shared resource to set up an evaluation framework, gather input, analyse and report outcomes and recommendations on a consistent basis. As I've already said, this is not only about the numbers, this is about steps being taken and outcomes, quantitative and qualitative. And the final theme is don't be a one-hit wonder. Whilst innovation is critical for the aviation and aerospace sectors, traditions are still prevalent when it comes to recruitment, decision-making and risk-taking. It will therefore be impossible to achieve gender balance overnight or through a succession of one-off initiatives and events. It requires sustained structural transformation at a sector-wide level. It's critical that organisations within the aviation and aerospace sectors adopt a long-term commitment to transformation. We know that the aviation and aerospace sectors are particularly prone to uncontrollable factors, the coronavirus pandemic being a live example, and these have the potential to derail progress in the short term, but with long-term effects on progress to gender balance. So the key takeaways are treat change as a long-term programme of education and transformation. As with any other organisation transformation programme, this requires a multidisciplinary approach that is planned carefully. There will be the need for disruption, transformation of structure and mindsets, which involves risk-taking and stepping out of comfort zones. There therefore needs to be planned periods of stability to embed the changes and build comfort. And know your audience and adjust your approach. In the aviation and aerospace sectors, many outreach efforts are adjusted to inspire different audiences. So whether they're inspiring primary students to those in further education, we need to adjust our approach to engage and enable different groups on their career trajectory. And we found perceptions differ by level and by gender. So understanding the different needs by audience is critical to ensure efforts are appropriately targeted. So finally, start a series of movements. Coordinate effort, but definitely divide and conquer. This is a big programme when you consider the scale and amount of change required, short, mid and long term. This can be achievable by spreading and cascading your efforts. Working together across the Charter, efforts can be coordinated to ensure they reinforce and build on each other, covering all audiences and geographies and having a greater impact. So in summary, as a minimum, we ask Charter signatories to lead the way in starting the conversation, make time to discuss and understand the level of commitment and clarity of purpose by identifying personal passion for inclusion, creating accountability, extend the concept of diversity and inclusion champions, and build a distributed level of accountability for achieving gender balance throughout levels and across functions and businesses, and coordinating your approach, whether it's a model of central funding and resource for measuring and reporting progress or a planned programme of initiatives, ensure you're aligned, complementing and building on each other's work. I do hope you find the report helpful. Thank you for listening.
So thank you so much, Anne-Marie, for giving us an overview of the insights of the report. And obviously we'll be sending out a full link to the report straight after this session to all of the participants. So it's now nearly 11 o'clock, so we're going to take our 2-minute silence to reflect, come together to honour and remember all of those who served in the armed forces. So we'll see you in 2 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. So now we're going to move to Baroness Sue Campbell. We're delighted to have her here today, and really wonderful when you see the report to see the wonderful work and how we can learn so much from what football has done, and where Sue has been at the forefront of making that happen. So she became Director of Women's Football in 2018 at the FA. And she brings years of her experience and her amazing leadership for our very own London 2012 Olympics and UK sport over the years. She's received 11 honorary doctorates, and her most recent honor was to be awarded a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire in 2019 for her services to sport. And she'll share with us how passion and purpose are at the heart of any successful inclusion strategy. So without further ado, Sue, over to you. Oh, you are on mute. Sue, perhaps.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate your invitation to join you today, and I've been delighted to work with Anne-Marie in helping to provide some evidence, we hope, of what's possible. And I hope most importantly that the report is useful to you and it helps create some transformational change. I couldn't begin today, though, without mentioning the last 24 hours at the Football Association. And I have to say that I am very proud of my colleagues at the FA that I work with and the work we have done to move women's football forward. But I guess what it shows us is there's still a lot of work to do, and individual prejudice and individual lack of understanding is something we'll battle every day, and is not a quick fix. It's something that takes time. So I'll move on now and talk positively about my passion and how I believe passion and purpose are linked together. And indeed, if the last 24 hours has taught me anything, it's that at times like this, it's your moral purpose that allows you to continue. I'm going to talk a little bit about moral purpose and business purpose. All of you will be very familiar with business purpose. You know, it's that bottom line. It's what drives our businesses and our industries. But for me, moral purpose is just as important, if not more important. And I want to just give you two very quick examples. At UK Sport, I was in charge of our Olympic and Paralympic teams going into Beijing and London. And our business purpose, laid down by our government and lottery funding, was winning more medals. And everybody understands that. And how you apply your resource and what you do with it helps you achieve that. But that wasn't what motivated us. That wasn't what took us from 10th in the medal table to 3rd in the medal table. What motivated us was the belief that together we could make sure any individual, no matter where they lived in the United Kingdom, no matter what their gender, no matter what their disability, if they had the desire, they had the passion, that we were going to make sure they had a fair chance to win a medal. So what drove us was our desire to create a fair system, a system that allowed all to thrive. And in the end, of course, we won the medals. Going to the FA, my first meeting with the FA Council, I think I was a bit of a disappointment because I stood up and said, I do like football, but that's not why I'm here. And you could see this sort of collective gasp on the far side of the audience. I said, I'm here because I want to change the lives of girls and women. And the Football Association is a powerful brand. And right now it speaks to many, many men in society. But does it really speak to our women, to our young girls? Does it feel inclusive? Does it make them feel that they are empowered to play, to coach, to officiate, to lead in the boardroom? And the answer was no. And I said, I am here to change that. I can't say I won a rapid round of applause, but I made it very clear that I had a very strong moral purpose to do what I was doing. So what did I find? I started in 2016 as head of women's football. And I started by looking at what I found in the organisation. And like the minister said, I found a few pioneers, you know, people who had somehow endured the environment they were in and were doing great things. And I stand on their shoulders, as we always do. We stand on the shoulders who pioneer these things. But I began to realise that I could create something very special here, a vision. We call it the mountain. And when I started, I have to say, at the FA, I felt I was on the beach with fog all around me. And gradually, as I asked lots of questions and began to understand, I moved to sort of higher ground and began to see the mountain. And the mountain was simple. Why couldn't we make opportunities there for everybody, regardless of their gender, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their disability or background? Of course we could. And so I began to talk to my chief executive, and he said to me, do you want a women's division? And I said, no. If I am going to transform things, change things is sometimes easy. You can do an immediate action to change something, but to transform something, to create long-term change, I said, no. I want one person in every division of the Football Association that leads on women's football. And he said, well, where are you going to find them? I said, trust me, I will find them. And what I found was both people internally, my pioneers, and people externally who'd done great things in women's football, not women's football, other sports, and had made a real difference to women's opportunities. And by combining that external and internal energy and passion, the passion for football and the passion for change, we have created something, I believe, quite special. Now, has that been easy for those people put into those roles? No, it's not. And I remember very early on, I won't name her, an individual that I put into a particular role where she was surrounded by 200 men working on men's football, and she was the one woman. And after a number of weeks, she said to me, I don't know why you brought me into this job, because this is a nightmare. And I said, look, follow your heart, do what is right, and slowly people will start to understand. So what I decided to do was pull together my troops across the divisions on a monthly basis, just to remind us what our moral purpose was, just to remind us what our mission was, and just to give people the reassurance and the confidence to go back into battle, so to speak, to begin to change things. So these were experts in their own field, but they had a really interesting quality. They were a little feisty and a bit tenacious, not necessarily easy to manage, but certainly have nudged their way to change things. So not only have we changed things in terms of opportunities for women, we've changed the very way the Football Association works, how women are embedded into every part of the organisation. So, for example, the senior management team now of the Football Association is over 50% women. Our board is now got 4 women on, still not quite 50%, but we're getting there. And I think what's happened is that diversity of thinking, because women do see things differently. It's not better, it's not worse, it's different. That diversity of thinking brought to the table has energized everybody. It's not just energized people working in women's football, it's energized everybody. And there has been a sense of collaboration, a sense of let's have a constancy of purpose to drive change, to make this game accessible for all. So for me, leading this change has been about 2 things. One, an absolute belief in every individual that you work with. And that has to be a belief in them as a diverse group. My group that I work with is incredibly diverse. They're not easy to work with. They are challenging, they are thought-provoking, they're dynamic, and they push. But I also am passionate about the fact that if you bring together a diverse group of thinkers, a diverse group of people, and you get them focused on a common mission, then absolutely anything is possible. And I hope, despite the events of the last 24 hours, you will see that the Football Association moving forward is a much more balanced, inclusive, diverse, and fair, equitable organisation. And that women's football still has a long way to go. And I guess one of my other messages to you today is this doesn't happen overnight. It requires constancy of purpose, it requires enormous patience, and it requires resilience, the ability to keep coming back, even though it's difficult. And I always say to my troops, as I call them, that if there are barriers in your way, step back. Don't try and bang your head on a barrier. It just gives you a headache. Step back from the problem, find a way round it, under it, over it, or through it. But we can find a way. And that is what you have to believe. If you want to bring about transformational change, you have to believe right in your heart as well as in your head that nothing can stop you. And I implore you to read this report, but then to turn it into action and not be fazed by the fact it won't work the first time, it may not work the second time, but stick with it, fight hard, and I believe the industry as a whole will benefit enormously from diverse thinking and diverse workforce. Thank you very much indeed.
Oh, thank you so much, Baroness Sue Campbell. Such inspirational words. I've only played football once in my life, but I might be taking it up now after what you've gone through.
We have football for everybody.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. So now I'll hand over to my excellent co-chair, Jacqui Sutton. Jacqui is Chief Customer Officer at Rolls-Royce. She became my co-chair in the summer after Catherine Bennett rotated off. And I'll now hand over to Jacqui to lead our Q&A and take us to the closeout at 11:30. Jacqui, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really reflecting on those words that you just shared with us, Sue. So much of it resonated with me personally, having been in the aerospace industry for more than 25 years now. The words resilience, the words tenacious, all of those really rang true, as well as pioneers. I can think of lots of pioneers. And thank you so much to all of the panelists for what's been a really stimulating session. I think what's so fantastic is that this report is not just insightful, but also is tangible in its recommendations of what could make a difference. And what we're passionate about as a charter is that with more than 200 signatories, we have a role to play now in getting those recommendation and messages out, not only to our signatories, but far and wide beyond. So let me just move into a few of the questions that have been coming in. If I could ask our panelists to take some of these questions, then that would be fantastic. And I'm actually going to start with the Minister, if that's okay, Robert. The first question we've got is, people would just like to hear a bit more about what the government is doing to promote diversity in the aviation and aerospace sectors, please.
Jacqui, thank you. And yes, I'm absolutely right. A critical question that. Well, look, it's an absolute priority for the government to do exactly that. As I've said in my opening remarks, to make sure that we do actually have real progress in terms of diversity in the aviation sector. And I've referred to the programme that we launched in October 2019, which is called Reach for the Sky. And that has that core aim. That has that core aim of making industry more diverse, more inclusive and accessible. And that has 4 key pillars. And those are raising the profile of aviation, delivering outreach programs, strengthening career pathways into the sector, and then skills and training options. So that's quite a big part of it, and that's a big practical step that we're taking. And the reason why we've looked at it like that is that they take the view of looking from the pathway, a bit like the report today, in fact, of looking at the pathway through, so raising the profile, looking at the pathway into the sector itself, inspiring people, and then going further and showing, once you've generated that passion and that support for the sector, how you can actually make it real and make it actually happen in real life. And we've got a number of programs that are up and running already under that, and many of those which you may have heard of. And there's 5 charities: STEMETS, Education and Employers, Fly to Help, and then with the Royal Aeronautical Society and the Air League. So that's part of it. Another part of it that I ought just to mention as well is career pathways, which is better signalling the routes into aviation once you've already decided that it is the right path for you, because then we can look at ensuring that it actually happens, where you can go and what steps you next need to take. And after that, you have the skills and training piece, which is intended to address structural barriers, those sort of practical obstacles to getting in. And those are things like pilot maternity leave, for example, or the costs of training, diversity reporting, and things like that. So those are some of the practical steps. But in addition, the last thing I'd just like to tell you about is we have 11 aviation ambassadors, and those are a group of volunteers from the sector, from the industry, and they work alongside government to really showcase diversity. So it's practical, inspirational examples of people who have really achieved in their field, and they can inspire others to go on and do the same. And that is from general aviation, commercial, aerospace, military. So very much, you know, if you've got an ask, if you've got an event coming up where you would like to have just such an inspiring person come along to speak, then please do let us know, and we'll be glad to put you in touch with someone.
Thank you very much. I think you mentioned several really key things there, initiatives that the government has going, that I just occurred to me, Sumati, that I know via our website, I think we can do even more to promote those and share those messages more broadly, you know, with the signatories and those people that access that kind of information via the Charter website. So I think we'll make a note that we'll connect with those ambassadors you referenced to make sure that we're playing our part in promoting those different activities.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you. I've got a really good question for Sue, and I have a feeling we're going to get a really open and honest answer. It really relates to targets, Sue, that it can be quite a controversial topic sometimes. And the question is, were there targets set in order to reach that level of representation at senior management levels in women's football? And if so, you know, do you think that they've therefore been a good thing? Are you a subscriber in the concept of targets?
If you mean quotas, there weren't quotas as such, but I think what Martin set me were three fairly big, bold goals when I started: double women's participation, double the fan base, and win the World Cup. Three small tasks that I was asked to do. And what happened, in order to do that, we had to begin to drive major programs on the ground, increase publicity, increase commercial marketing, change the profile of the women's game, professionalize the league, a lot of steps. And in so doing, what started to happen, more and more women got interested in getting engaged in the game. And those were women from a whole range of industries. They weren't just people who played football. They were people whose children were playing football, who really saw that they could make a difference. So the members of the board and the members of the SMT are not the Women's Football Board and the Women's SMT. They are the Football Association's SMT and board. That's why, as the women's game has grown, it has changed the ambition of the whole organisation, and it has opened up opportunities for women who wanted to come. So we didn't have quotas. And I think the danger sometimes with quotas is that people fill the space as requested to tick a box rather than find the right person. And I think you have to, you know, what has grown the number of women engaged in football at every level, from the boardroom through the game, is the competence and excellence of those women. So it's really important that you make sure, even if you do have a quota, that those people joining are not there just as a token gesture, but are there with the capability to do a great job. So I'm not, you know, we didn't have quotas. We didn't do it that way. We did it by growing competence and confidence in women across the organisation.
But interestingly, you had what some people might have called a kind of ambitious vision, if you like. We did. Signposting the direction that you wanted to take people.
Yeah, and I think really interestingly, you know, that was not an overarching strategy. It was 3 strategic objectives, and we honed in on making those happen. And I kept saying to my colleagues, we deliver this, we start to send a message. These have got to be delivered. This is non-negotiable. Let's make this happen. When we make this happen, we'll be in a different place. We've just launched our 2024 strategy, and it is a true strategy. It embraces all women, those who want to play at every age and stage recreationally, those who want to compete for their country, and those who just want to have fun. So it's you know, it's a different approach, but we've earned the right, if you like, for that approach by actually delivering on those objectives we were set. And we couldn't have done that without this very passionate and very capable workforce that we managed to recruit and get in across the business.
Right. Thank you very much for that. I think it's picking up a little on that theme, actually, which is about how do we realise move from commitment into action. And it's a question that I'm going to ask Anne-Marie to address for us, if you would. How do we help senior leaders in the various organisations in our sectors move from commitment to action in order that we can start seeing some tangible results?
Sure. Well, I think action has to happen in two ways. So there's inclusion, which is behavioural, and there's inclusion, which is structural. So from a behavioural perspective, are you having enough conversations? Are you asking how people are? Are you asking about their experience? But what we found in the research was both genders reported that people aren't asking them about their ambitions and their aspirations and where do they want to go and what can be done to help them achieve that. So if I could achieve one thing on the back of this research, it's more conversations and being willing to let go of your greatest assets as part of encouraging them to progress their careers. So that would be the one thing behaviourally. But then thinking about structures, there's going to be processes, practices that you're responsible for, but they are driving inequality. And so it's being willing to make changes to those structures and to the practices and processes that aren't helping everyone. And that actually requires differentiation for different audiences. So we were really surprised as you broke the data down into different levels of seniority and different genders and started to overlay the picture. People were having very, very different experiences depending on where they were in their career, where they were in the organisation. So really just taking a very honest, open view about what you're responsible for and holding the mirror up and thinking, are there any changes? Are there any adjustments that I can make in order to actually create equity for people to progress?
Okay, thank you very much, Anne-Marie. I think all practical suggestions, which is all really helpful. I've got one for my co-chair now, Sumati. Obviously, and we're all very conscious this year of all of the important movement around Black Lives Matter and the other diversity questions that are so key and that people are particularly conscious of during COVID as well. But this is a question more around how do we encourage more BAME women to take an interest in and perhaps take up pilot training, for example, one of the exciting areas that our industry can offer?
So it's a good question. So it's not something I've researched specifically, how we encourage. I've thought a lot about how do we, encourage BAME women to come into aviation and aerospace. Being a BAME woman myself, a senior leader, woman of color, and an interesting stat that exists is in the world, in India, it's the place that has the highest proportion of female commercial pilots in the world. So they're at 12%. So it's more than double than the West. So then I consider, well, actually, I've looked at that stat and I've often thought it's something I should research. But what I get to is very much as Sue said, like in football, we have to start at a younger age. By the time people are thinking about becoming pilots when they're 18 or 19, they need to have considered it as a career choice, perhaps at a younger age, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So at Virgin Atlantic, where I've worked for 16 years and just finished, we did a lot of events of pilot career fairs, including events for children, including children between the ages of 8 and 12, to see role models and see female pilots show up so that you start to believe that it really is an option for you. So I think we can do a lot more in this space around showcasing the role models. And I actually think taking the report and its findings and applying that to pilots will be something that I'll be considering and how we work with the industry to help that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think I just want to kind of bring our focus back to the report, just as we move into the last few minutes and need to start wrapping up. And I'm going to bring the question back to you again, Anne-Marie, if I may, just because there's some really important findings in this report that you've outlined for us. And of course, we'll be encouraging everyone that's kindly devoted their time to beam in today, to download the report and read it at your own leisure and look at those findings. But is there a key insight that has stayed with you in particular, and especially given your background in looking into diversity and inclusion? Is there something about that report that perhaps surprised you and has really stayed with you in particular?
Yeah, it's without doubt been the impact of open passion and commitment, role modelling, and sharing with people practically what they can do. I can't begin to tell you how surprised we were just how dramatic the difference was when we looked at how people felt when their leaders were passionate and committed to when they were not, and the gap that made to people feeling that they could progress their career in an organisation. There were opportunities to excel. They were building the necessary skills that they needed, was always parted dramatically by whether there was commitment at the top or not, and it was about authentic commitment. And I think if the commitment is as authentic as we would like, then the investment will come and the long-term change will be agreed. And so we won't allow short-term issues to stop and halt the progress that we're trying to make. So it's all about that leadership from the top, that authenticity for sure, and really just understanding what's driving that and helping people think beyond the numbers, as I've said, to what actually can happen as a result of getting better gender balance.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid we're out of time. I really want to thank our panelists, who I think you'll all agree have been incredibly inspiring this morning. I think it's so important in this COVID environment we're in to be doing something like this. Thank you very much to our main sponsors, Jacqui and Aerospace and Bays, who've helped make both the report and this particular event happen. I'd like to thank Liz Moscrop of Gear Up TV, the team at Farnborough International who provided with this digital platform and the technical support today, as well as the Pembroke and Rye team for their PR support. So more than 300 of you have joined us today. Thank you so much. Please download the report. Keep an eye on the Charter's social media platforms, where we'll keep you informed on further outcomes from the report. We're so excited to see what tangible progress we can make building on the findings that have come out of it. Please share the messages far and wide on your own social media platforms. And I have to plug the Charter. If your company, your business or organisation is not yet a signatory, please join us. Please sign up to all the rest of us who feel passionate about this topic for our fantastic industries. And last but not least, please read the report, download it, read it. And on behalf of Sumati and me and all of us at the Charter, thank you all very much again for joining us today. Thank you.